Good afternoon. My name is Jamie Parrish, and I work with the ESRI training team here in Redlands, California. I want to welcome you all to today's live training seminar, but I'm not doing this alone. I am delighted today to be joined by Sally Swenson, a member of our virtual campus team. Sally will help me today to answer some of your questions. Thanks for being here, Sally. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started with the What's New in ArcGIS 9 Labeling and Annotation live training seminar. The topics for this seminar are what's new in labeling, the new Maplex extension, what's new in annotation, and the format that will be followed is each topic presented will be followed by a software demonstration, a review, and a question and answer session. So there are many new labeling functions in ArcGIS version 9, and in this first part of the seminar, I will introduce you to these core functions. With ArcGIS 8.3, ArcMap had a single labeling engine called the ESRI Label Engine. With ArcGIS 9, ArcMap has two label engines, the ESRI Standard Label Engine and the ESRI Maplex Label Engine. The engine, in simple terms, is a collection of software components that make labeling possible. The ESRI Standard Label Engine is core with ArcMap. The ESRI Maplex Label Engine is available as an extension for ArcMap at all license levels, ArcView, ArcEditor, and ArcInfo. An extension, just to trigger your memory, is a product that extends the functionality of an application. I will introduce Maplex in the next section of the seminar. In this section, I will focus on the ESRI Standard Label Engine. In ArcMap version 9, all of the labeling tasks that you do will be done from one central location, the new labeling toolbar, and that's highlighted in the red box here. Most functionality on the labeling toolbar is functionality you previously had, but it has been moved to this new location. There are new tools on the toolbar as well. You will add the labeling toolbar just like you do any other toolbar. You can go through the View menu here to Toolbars and add it that way, or you can right-click on any gray space and add it that way as well. Labeling is also map-based in ArcMap version 9. So what do I mean by map-based? Map-based means you manipulate your labels via the labeling toolbar, specifically the label manager, which is highlighted here in the red box, in contrast to manipulating your labels via the layer properties. At version 8.3, we had layer-based labeling. You had to access the layer properties to manipulate the label properties. There's a button now in the labeling toolbar again called the Label Manager, and when clicked, this button opens up the Label Manager, which you see here, where properties and settings for your labels can be manipulated. In the Label Manager, you have access to label properties and settings for all layers in an active data frame. Different properties will appear on the right side of the dialog depending on whether you're clicked on a point, a line, or a polygon layer. On the slide, I'm clicked on a point layer default class on the left in the Label Classes panel. Notice the placement properties here in the red box are options for points. So we could place the label around the point, on the point, specify an angle, or choose an angle in a field. Now I'm clicked on the line layer, Freeways layer, in the default class on the left in the Label Classes panel. Notice how the Placement Properties panel updates to accommodate line options. So we could place the line label horizontally or parallel, curved or perpendicular. Finally, I am clicked on the Polygon layer default class on the left in the Label Classes panel. Again, notice how the Placement Properties panel updates to accommodate polygon options. Now, as I pointed out the polygon placement options, a smile might have appeared on your face. You now have some additional placement options for your polygons. At ArcGIS 8.3 in ArcMap, all polygon labels were placed horizontally. At ArcGIS version 9 in ArcMap, you have three options. Always horizontal, and you see the picture here. always straight, so the label's straight to the polygon, or try horizontal first and then straight. There has been significant improvements in the user experience pertaining to setting up and working with label classes. A label class gives the user the ability to label groups of features within a single layer differently. You will set up and work with your label classes in the Label Manager dialog, and that's what you see here on the slide. In the Label Classes panel, over here on the left, under the layer, you will see your label classes. So right now, you're just seeing the default label class for these 3 layers. Let me go ahead and outline the process of creating a label class. The first step when creating a label class is to click the layer in the Label Classes panel, and I've done that here. It's highlighted. The layer will become highlighted. Notice the information on the right side of the dialog gives you the functionality, meaning boxes and buttons, to create the label class. If you click the word default under the layer, which is the default label class for this layer, the right side of the dialog will display with settings and properties for the labels in the default label class. So in order to create a new label class, you want to be clicked on the layer. Now you will click in the box in the Add Label Class panel under the words Enter Class Name. In this case, the name for the new label class is established after 1985. So let me explain this example a little bit further. I have a layer named Major Attractions, and within that layer I have 2 classes of labels. I'm going to label the default label class one way, and then those features in the label class named established after 1985 another way, so I can distinguish the difference between them. Now I will click the Add button. And now there is this new label class called Established After 1985 for the Major Attractions layer. The next thing I'd want to do then is to click on this label class, and the right side of the dialog over here would update so I can manipulate the properties of that label class. So a very intuitive process, a lot easier than it has been in the past. Label priority ranking controls the order in which labels get placed on the map. In the example on the slide, the Major Attractions layer has a higher priority than both freeways and climate. Therefore, if there was not enough room on a map to place both the Major Attractions and freeway labels, the Major Attractions label would be placed. Label weight ranking controls the relative drawing importance of features and labels on a map. Weights are used when there's a conflict between features and labels. Both the label priority ranking and the label weight ranking were available at ArcGIS version 8.3. However, these properties were accessed through the data frame properties. Now they're both accessible through the labeling toolbar, so it's easier to work with them. The Lock Labels tool enables you to lock the labels for the current extent. When you lock the labels, you are locking the current size and position of the labels. This allows you to move around the map without waiting for those labels to redraw, because you could have a lot of labels and to wait for them to redraw could take some time. In the graphic on the slide, we are at the full extent of the data. If I click the Lock Labels button, my labels will be locked. Now look at the graphic on the slide. I have zoomed in on a crowded area in my data. The area, incidentally, is Coronado Island in San Diego, California. As you can see, the Lock Labels functionality also provides you with the ability to zoom in on crowded areas without changing label size and placement. The Lock Labels button, again, is found on that labeling toolbar. This Lock Labels button serves as a toggle, so when you click it, it locks the labels, and then when you click it again, it unlocks the labels. Often there is not enough room to place the labels for all the features on your map. The View Unplaced Labels button shows all the labels that are not currently placed. The unplaced labels are drawn in a different color so you can see them distinctly from the placed labels. So here, we've clicked our View Unplaced Labels button on the labeling toolbar, and our unplaced labels are showing up. They're in red, our placed labels are in black. You can change the default red color of the unplaced labels through the labeling toolbar, labeling dropdown, the options. And that brings us to our first software demonstration, and I'll go ahead and activate ArcMap here. This map document is called San Diego, and it has several layers of information: streams, railroads, freeways, zip codes, and the ocean in there. And what I'd like to show you all is using the label manager to create some label classes. So take you through that very intuitive process. So I'm going to go ahead and pull my labeling toolbar into the view. Incidentally, all the toolbars that I'm working with are outside of the ArcMap display area. They've already been turned on. And again, you can do that through the view menu or by right-clicking on the gray space. But this is the labeling toolbar, new with ArcGIS version 9. And if I click right here, we see the label manager. And it's a lot different than how we used to label within ArcMap. If I want to turn on all my labels for all my layers and those label classes, we can use the Select All button, but another easy way is to just click in one box while holding down the Control key, and all of those different labels will turn on. So I'll go ahead and click OK so you can see our labels. Okay, now within the label, I want to show you label classes. So in order to make it a little bit easier to see those label classes that I'll create, I'm going to go ahead and turn off some of the layers and also some of the labels. So we'll go ahead and do that same type of keystroke here in the table of contents. I'm just going to turn on zip codes and freeways, and then we'll go into the label manager again and turn off those zip code labels. Turn these other ones off as well. So we're going to focus on the freeways, and I'm going to create a new label class. So I'm going to right-click freeways. Notice how the right side of the dialog changed here to support creating a label class. I'm going to highlight it, and I'm going to enter my new class name. So we're going to call it Close Range. And I'll go ahead and click Add. And you'll notice Close Range came over here under Freeways. So I'm going to go ahead and click Close Range. Notice the right side of the dialog changed again. Now I can set some properties for that particular label class. So we're going to go ahead and change the symbol. We'll change it to black. We'll keep the bold, the Arial 8.5 font point. We'll go ahead and keep the placement properties, but let's go ahead and change the scale range here to don't show the labels when out beyond 100,000. And I'll click OK. Now I'm going to do some manipulation of the default class. Let's go ahead and rename it, and we'll call it Far Range. And I'll click OK. And let's go ahead and keep it red, bold, Arial 8.5 font, but let's change the scale range here to don't show labels when zoomed in beyond 100,000. And we'll click OK, and we'll click OK again. Okay, so right now we're at a scale of 1 to 254,375. So our red labels, okay, or our far range labels are showing. Now if I zoomed in, and I'll go ahead and move the labeling toolbar out of the way to here, maybe a little bit further here, to 1 to 67,000, notice how our close range labels turned on. So the process of creating the label class is more intuitive now at version 9. Okay, so we'll go back to the slides, to our review and question and answer. We talked about the two labeling engines and what an engine is, some of the basic labeling enhancements, this new dialog called the Label Manager where we create label classes and manipulate our label classes. We talked about label priority and weight rankings, our polygon placement options, label locking, and how to view our unplaced labels. So at this time, I'm going to pass it over to Sally to answer some of your questions.
There are several good questions. I'd like to begin with one from Claudia. from Ontario. She asks, what does the angle by a field mean in the placement properties for points? Well, the angle by is a rotational characteristic, so you can place labels around a point, just imagine in a kind of a circular fashion from an anchor point. But if you want to have your angle value stored in your feature class, you would store it in an attribute, and that would be the field in the reference to angle by a field. Juan from Gastonia wondered about orienting the labels according to the geometry of the polygons. If I understand this question correctly, perhaps you have something like parcels at the end of a cul-de-sac. As Jamie illustrated in the placement properties for polygons, you have the ability to choose between straight and horizontal, with horizontal being parallel to the page and straight being on an oblique line parallel to the longest angular line from the polygon. So you do have that as an option. Ken from Fairfax has a question about conflicts. What happens when there is a label conflict and both labels or label classes have the same priority but still must be plotted? Well, when it comes to the label priority ranking, that is literally a ranking like 1 through 10 with a label class at the highest priority and another label class falling at the bottom. There is also the ability to use label weight rankings and apply weights to both labels and features, basically a low to high ranking, which are to take the greater preference. If you really need to plot and want consistent location for your labels, you might want to convert to annotation, which will be covered in the third topic today. Tom from Los Angeles wonders, can I share label properties from one application, from one map document to another? Actually, those labeling properties are saved within one map document, and you would have to share the map document or make a copy of that map document and also share the data with another user. And now let's turn back to Jamie for a final question on labeling.
Thank you, Sally. We have a question from James from Atlanta. His question is, what will happen to all the labels that I set up using layer properties at 8.3? Do I have to create my labels all over again using the new label manager? The short answer is no. All of your labeling properties will still be intact when you open your 8.3 map document in ArcGIS 9. All right. So we'll move on to the next topic then, and that's the new Maplex extension. In the last section, I discussed with you the ESRI standard label engine. Now let's discuss this other label engine available to you called Maplex. In the upcoming slides, I can only focus on a couple of these different benefits of Maplex. There are lots of benefits to using Maplex, as you can see on the slide here. This isn't even all of the benefits of Maplex. I only chose a few of those benefits. But we're going to focus during this section on the following topics: label stacking, abbreviation dictionaries, font reduction, and line and polygon label placement options, again, due to our time constraint. The Maplex label engine is an extension for ArcMap, so you must turn it on. The Maplex extension works with all the ArcGIS desktop products, ArcView, ArcEditor, and ArcInfo. You can switch to the Maplex label engine from the ESRI standard label engine in the data frame properties, as you see here on the left-hand side, or you can go to the labeling toolbar, the labeling drop-down, and choose the Use Maplex Label Engine option. Once you enable the Maplex label engine, additional functionality on this labeling toolbar will be available to you. The label manager, whether you are using the ESRI standard label engine or the Maplex label engine, provides a centralized location for you to create label classes, to manipulate those label classes, to change text symbol, and also placement properties. When you are labeling with ESRI Maplex Label Engine, the Label Manager also allows you to adjust the Maplex label placement properties for each label class. Let me give you an example. One difference you will see in the Label Manager with the Maplex Label Engine is the additional placement properties for points, lines, and polygons. So if you recall back to the last section, we went through and we looked at what the placement properties looked like in this Label Manager dialog for points, lines, and polygons. Now, the points should look different to you, those placement properties. With Maplex, you're going to get additional placement properties for your points, lines, and your polygons. That brings us to a review question that I'd like you all to be involved in. You can locate the review question link in the upper left corner of your browser window, so go ahead and click this link now. The review question is the following. Which of the following is a new way to create a label class in ArcGIS 9? A, right-click the layer and choose Properties. Remember, we're talking about ArcGIS 9. B, use the new labeling toolbar and Label Manager. C, convert your labels to annotation. Or D, use the new Maplex extension. To submit your answer, go ahead and click A, B, C, or D, then click the Send button. We'll come back to the answer for this review question very soon. A common challenge when labeling a map is to fit many labels into a small area. The Maplex extension can stack your labels. In the past, you could stack labels. You had to use VBScript code. With Maplex, you do not have to write code. In addition, you have absolute control of the stacking properties, the justification, the stacking character, and line break options, just to mention a few. So here in the slide, again, we're looking at some data of San Diego, Coronado Island. You see the point features, and they are being labeled, but on one line. Okay, so the labels are quite long in some circumstances. This is without the Maplex label stacking functionality. When you check Stack Label in the Placement Properties panel, Maplex for ArcGIS automatically stacks labels that are too long. To access the stacking properties, you will click the Properties button here in the Placement Properties panel. Notice here the stacked labels are much easier to read, so we can really tell what label goes with what point. This is with Maplex label stacking. Another strategy for fitting labels into small areas is to reduce the size of the label text. Reducing the font size reduces the overall size of the labels in areas where there are size constraints. The graphic on the slide depicts block groups. Each label you see is the map block lot code for that block. As you can see in the graphic, many of the labels span more than one feature. We can see that down here very well. It is difficult at times to determine what label goes with what block. I know I'm having some difficulty here seeing which label goes with what block. This is without Maplex font reduction. When you allow the Maplex label engine to reduce the font size, the labels will fit nicely in the block they represent. To access this font reduction functionality, click the Properties button in the Placement Properties panel. In the Placement Properties dialog, you're going to click the Label Fitting Strategy tab. You're going to check the Reduce Font Size checkbox, and you're going to click the Limits button. When you click the Limits button, this label reduction dialog will appear. You have control over the lower limit font size and the step interval that specifies the font size variance for the label engine. Let me give you an example, and it's on the dialog here in the slide. For a label with a base font of 10 point, you might set a lower limit of 4 point and a step interval of 0.5 point. Maplex will first try to place each label at 10 point, then 8, then 6, then 4. If a label will not fit within a polygon, along a line, or around a point at 4 point, then the label will not be placed. The font reduction functionality really helps in fitting labels into small areas, as you can see here in the graphic that is used font reduction. All of the labels, it's clear to see what block they represent. Okay, let's go to our review question results. To view the results, you're going to click the review question link in the upper left corner of your browser window. So which of the following is a new way to create a label class in ArcGIS 9? Well, the answer is B. You're going to use the new labeling toolbar and the label manager. A, the right-click the layer and choose properties. You can get to the label tab if you do it that way, and you can create a label class. But here we're focusing on how to do this in 9. So the correct answer would be B. And it looked like most of you got that correct. Over 75%, more towards 85%, got that correct. So congratulations. You are paying attention. Okay, moving on then. The Maplex label engine can automatically shorten words in order to fit a given label on the map. This is yet another strategy for fitting your labels on the map. This is accomplished by using this thing called an abbreviation dictionary. The graphic on the slide is a map of the states of the United States. Notice how the state name labels on the East Coast over here are quite cluttered. So an abbreviation dictionary would help to alleviate this clutter. None of them are really overlapping, but most of them are spanning more than one state. Creating the abbreviation dictionary is easy, and I'm not just saying that. It is quite easy. You access the abbreviation dictionary dialog via the labeling toolbar, the labeling drop-down, and then there's an option for abbreviation dictionary. You're going to type in the keyword and the abbreviation and the type. You can save the abbreviation dictionary to a DIC file so you can load them into other maps. These dictionaries can also be stored in a database as well. Once the abbreviation dictionary has been created, you need to apply it to a layer, and you do that via the Label Fitting Strategy tab, and you check this checkbox of Abbreviate Label and choose Options. When you use an abbreviation dictionary, the Maplex label engine will first attempt to place the full text of the label. Then it will abbreviate any words found in the dictionary for labels that could not be placed. However, you can force abbreviation, so Maplex always uses the abbreviation. Notice how the map here on the right looks less cluttered on the East Coast now that we've implemented these abbreviations. The abbreviations of certain states, again, are being used to minimize the clutter that we saw on the previous map. So Pennsylvania has been abbreviated, and now it fits completely within its polygon, as does North Carolina. Linear features such as streets, rivers, utility lines, and airways are typically labeled using different labeling styles. For example, you might want the label for a river to follow the curvature of the feature. Maplex for ArcGIS offers a wide variety of line placement styles for an array of label placement scenarios. It also provides us with functionality for streets, because street maps have their own special label placement requirements. Maplex for ArcGIS has some placement strategies that are optimized for placing street labels. You can apply these street placement properties to any type of line feature. There are several label position options for polygons. By default, your polygon labels are going to be placed horizontally within the polygon, but you can also place labels along the medial axis, following the general curvature of the polygon. If the polygons are too small to contain the labels, you can place the labels horizontally outside of the polygon. You can also label the boundaries of polygons, as you see in the graphic here. For example, to help the map reader differentiate two sides of a state or a political border. The Maplex label engine offers many more options for polygon label placement than does the ESRI standard label engine. Again, Maplex is the advanced label placement extension for ArcMap. It provides us with a special set of tools that allow us to improve the cartographic quality of the labels on our maps. It has a wealth of functionality, and we've only touched on a few benefits, so I encourage you to learn about the other benefits that Maplex has to offer. That brings us to our second software demonstration, and I'm going to go ahead and pull up that San Diego map document again. This time I'm going to show you all the font reduction capabilities of Maplex. So let's go ahead and go to the full extent of our data, and let's go into the label manager. So let me pull down the labeling toolbar here, and we'll go ahead and turn off the freeways and turn on zip codes here and click OK. And right now I'm using the ESRI standard label engine. So what I need to do is turn on the Maplex label engine. First we need to turn on the extension here, and it actually already is on, but I just wanted to show you that. And then we also need to toggle to the Maplex label engine, and that's done via the labeling drop-down, or you can go through the data frame properties as well. Okay, also I'm going to turn off a couple of the layers so it's easier to see our different zip codes. A shortcut here again is to use that control key, turn them all off, and then turn our zip codes back on. So that font reduction functionality is found via the label manager, and if we click on our zip codes, the default label class, we have our placement properties panel for polygons, and we're going to go ahead and click the properties. The font reduction functionality is found on the Label Fitting Strategy tab. We're going to go ahead and click Reduce Font Size, click the Limits button, and here we have the font size information. Our fonts for this zip code default label class are 8 point. We're going to set the lower limit to 4 and the step interval to 0.5, and I'll go ahead and click OK. And OK on the placement properties, and OK on the label manager. Now looking at the display of these zip code polygons, you'll notice that some of the labels were reduced in size due to this functionality that we just enabled. So before, these polygon labels, these zip code labels, were very large, like the other ones here. Notice now they've conformed to the size of the polygon. So this one now fits completely within that little polygon, as well as this one here, this one, and also this one here. So that font reduction capability really does make our map look a little bit better and avoids our labels overlapping into additional polygons. Okay, we'll go ahead and go back to the slide and review and question and answer period. So again, with this section in Maplex, we talked about label stacking, the font reduction, the use of abbreviation dictionaries and alleviating clutter on our map, and our line and polygon label placement options. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Sally to answer some of your questions.
Thank you, Jamie. We have an initial question from Ramona concerning whether Maplex is included with ArcGIS 9. As Jamie mentioned early in her presentation, Maplex is an extension, so this is an add-on product and does require a separate purchase. Matthew from Eau Claire wonders whether you can just label the features in a selected set, and absolutely. This is one of the benefits of having label classes. You would actually make your selection using the SQL query capability of a label class. Jamie from Atlanta wonders whether a label can be created with information from more than one field, for example, owner name and acreage. And yes, that can be done by modifying the label expression using a little VB script, the VB script keyword VB new line. So you would basically concatenate your two fields together for stacking, or just place them side by side on the line. There's an excellent question concerning Maplex that has come in from a number of users and concerns how many people in your organization need to have Maplex. Can Maplex labels be viewed with the standard engine, or how actually to go about setting up for using Maplex? Basically, you'll need to establish kind of a labeling strategy and have as many people as necessary load and use the Maplex extension for creating the labels. Because the standard label engine cannot see Maplex labels, you then want to convert your Maplex labeling to Annotation, and then everyone in the organization will be able to view the labels. And again, Jamie will cover more about converting to Annotation in the final topic. Sharon asks whether it's possible to use the font reduction feature along with abbreviation. These are actually two separate kinds of labeling properties. So just because you've reduced the font doesn't mean that you can't use the abbreviation option, and I'm assuming you're referring to the abbreviation dictionary. And I'll take one more question before I turn the presentation back to Jamie. Brian from Geneseo asks whether we can get labels to draw behind a polygon layer. I'm not sure whether he's viewing that as a feature or a limitation, but your labels will draw on top. If you really want to move the labels in the table of contents, think about converting those labels to Annotation. Once you have the feature class, you can rearrange and move that feature class anywhere in the table of contents, even below a polygon layer. And now I'll turn back to Jamie to finish off.
Thank you, Sally. We'll do one more question. Mark from Tallahassee's asked, what about the performance with Maplex labels? Well, you'll remember when we were looking at the labeling toolbar, once I had enabled the Maplex label engine, that there was a drop-down at the very end. That drop-down has two options, fast and best. And so fast is going to take less time to resolve label conflicts, and it's probably a good option for getting started, doing some testing. But then there's also that best option, and that's going to find the best placement for your labels. So it's going to take a little bit longer, but it's probably going to make things look a little bit nicer. So those are your two options for label placement quality, and they also will help with performance as well. All right, so we'll go back to the slides then and talk about our last topic, which is what's new in annotation. And there are many new annotation tools and functionality in ArcGIS 9, and we'll go ahead and present those to you in this section. First, let's make sure we're all on the same page in regards to labels and annotation, because they are different. The differences are highlighted in the table on the slide, and I'll go ahead and mention just a couple. Our labels are dynamically placed. They're managed as a group. Your annotation's static and managed individually. There's a couple other options there that you can see are differences between labels and annotation. But so now that we're a little bit more clear, I hope very clear on what the differences are, let's talk about some of the new annotation enhancements. And those, some of those are highlighted here with the bullets on the slide. So the conversion dialog to go from labels to annotation is easier to use. We now support multiple classes in an annotation feature class, and there's an improved experience for unplaced annotation. And I'll talk about these three enhancements in more detail in the upcoming slides. So how is annotation created? There are a couple ways. You can create annotation as a feature class in a Geodatabase using ArcCatalog. We're not going to discuss that option in the seminar because there's nothing new with that. You can also create annotation by converting your labels to annotation. And I'm going to discuss this process with you. First, you must label the features in your map, and you can use the ESRI standard label engine or the Maplex label engine to do that. Next, by right-clicking on the layer in the ArcMap table of contents, you can convert your labels to annotation. This annotation can be stored in the map document as graphic annotation. The annotation can also be stored in the Geodatabase as standard annotation or feature-linked annotation. When the annotation is stored in the Geodatabase, the annotation layer can be added to ArcMap and manipulated using the Geodatabase annotation editing tools. Editing and creating standard annotation is available at all license levels. However, editing and creating feature-linked annotation requires an ARC editor or an ArcInfo license. Again, in this section, I'm going to focus on the Geodatabase annotation. To convert your labels to annotation, again, you must right-click the layer in the ArcMap table of contents and choose the Convert Labels to Annotation option on the context menu. The Labels to Annotation conversion dialog is much more intuitive at ArcGIS 9, as you can see here in the graphic. All the old options still apply, and new options have been added as well. You will specify your storage options first. The storage option is either you're storing the annotation in the database or the annotation stored in the map as graphic annotation. Again, I'm going to focus on the Geodatabase option in this section. Next, it's necessary to specify the selection options. You can choose to have all the label features converted to annotation, only those label features in the current extent, or only the label features that are part of a selected set, so it's up to you. Next, you need to specify the feature layer management information. Your annotation can be feature linked. You can append this annotation to another annotation feature class. You're also specifying here the name of the annotation feature class if it is being created new. So in this case, the name of the annotation feature class is USA_cities anno. The annotation feature class is automatically put in the Geodatabase where the features are located. Down here at the bottom where it says destination, you'll see the Geodatabase and its location, so we're storing this annotation feature class in the National Personal Geodatabase. The final and last step is to specify whether or not you want the unplaced labels in the layer to be stored as unplaced annotation in the feature class. This is a great option and it's new. Rather than the Geodatabase annotation being stored in the overflow window, it can now be stored in the Geodatabase annotation feature class with the rest of the annotation features. Now, just a little aside, and I'll point this out later on, when you open up the annotation feature class attribute table, you're going to notice a new field that's been added called status. This status field has whether or not your annotation is placed or unplaced, so you'll be able to tell by looking at the attribute table for that annotation feature class. Now, I've already discussed label classes in the first section of this seminar, but I have not discussed how multiple label classes for a layer are handled when converting your labels to annotation. Remember back to that first section. A label class gives you the ability to label groups of features within a single layer differently. The graphics on the slide show two label classes within a layer, one named default and the other named capital. So if we take a look over here in the label manager, we have our layer and our default label class and our capital label class. When you look at the map, the default label class displays the cities as black and a small font point. The capitals label class displays the capital cities as red and a larger font point, so they stand out more. In ArcGIS 8.3, each label class in a layer after converting to annotation was its own annotation feature class. Now at ArcGIS 9, each label class in a layer will be an annotation class in one annotation feature class. So let's look at the graphic on the left here. It's a picture of the ArcMap table of contents. You see the annotation layer that's been added to the ArcMap session, and you see the two annotation classes beneath it. So here's our USA Cities annotation feature class with two annotation classes, default and capital. If we look at the top graphic over here, this is the Arc Catalog tree, and there's our annotation feature class, that one annotation feature class called USA Cities Anno. Now, if we right-click that annotation feature class, choose Properties, the Feature Class Properties dialog box opens, and if we click on the Subtypes tab, you'll see those two annotation classes. This is new functionality with annotation, and it provides improved performance and manageability within the Geodatabase. With ArcMap at version 9, there's a new annotation toolbar, and that's on the slide here, the graphic on the slide. The toolbar provides a central location for creating, and most of those creation tools are right here throughout the center, and also some editing tools as well. You've got your Edit Annotation tool here, and this Unplaced Annotation window here. The Draw toolbar will no longer be needed in order to edit and create Geodatabase annotation. However, you will still use that Draw toolbar to create and edit map or graphic annotation. All the tools on this Annotation toolbar work in conjunction with the Editor toolbar, which I've just added to the slide here. You must start an edit session and set the current target layer to the appropriate annotation feature class. So earlier in this section, I discussed that now at ArcGIS 9, you have the ability to specify whether or not you want the unplaced labels in the layer to be stored as unplaced annotation in the feature class. Again, this is a great and new option. You will view and manage this unplaced annotation using the Unplaced Annotation window button, which is right here at the end of the Annotation toolbar. When you click this, the Unplaced Annotation window appears. Now, when you first open it, it's going to be empty. There will be no annotation features in there. You'll want to choose the feature class and then also click the Search Now button, and it will populate. You can work with each piece of Unplaced Geodatabase annotation by using the right-click context menu in the Unplaced Annotation window. In the graphic, you see that the city of Toledo, Ohio did not get placed. So here's the feature, but there's no piece of annotation. Consequently, the Toledo annotation feature was written to the Geodatabase, but with an unplaced status. So I can easily add this annotation feature by right-clicking the annotation feature in the Unplaced Annotation window and choosing Place Annotation. So as you can see, once I've done that, Toledo was added to the map display here. It is easy at this point then to use the Edit Annotation tool from the Annotation toolbar to manipulate this annotation feature. And that brings me to my next slide. This Edit Annotation tool here at the end of the Annotation toolbar is used for selecting, moving, and manipulating annotation features. The tool was available at 8.3. I'm wondering how many of you knew where it was located. It was actually located on the Advanced Editing toolbar, but it has been enhanced at ArcGIS 9 and moved to this Annotation toolbar, so in a central location here. One new enhancement is the bulk symbology updates to selected annotation features through the Attributes dialog, which is what you see here. You can change the font, the point size, the color properties of the layer level here on the left, and those properties will apply to all the annotation features in the Attribute dialog. So you make the change once here at the layer level, and it's applied to all of the annotation features in this dialog. Kind of along those same lines, another new enhancement is bulk attribute updates to selected annotation features through this Attributes dialog. You can change an attribute value, again of the layer level here on the left panel, and the attribute value will be applied to all the annotation features in the Attributes dialog. So maybe I want to make all these annotation features italicized. I could change this value to yes, and at the layer level here, it's going to apply to all of these annotation features. Most of the tools on the Annotation toolbar are used for creating new annotation. Creating new annotation features is a process, and I'll go ahead and outline that for you. The first thing you do before you add a new annotation feature to an existing annotation feature class is to pick a construction type. There are 5 different types to choose from, and in the graphic, I've chosen a leader line construction type, so my annotation feature will have a leader line to the feature. Once you've picked the construction type, you need to decide what text will be placed into the new annotation feature. You can manually type in the text through this little box here, or you can hover over the feature and press Control W on the keyboard. Now, I like things easy, so that's normally what I do. Click the Control W and it just appears on your map. Finally, you need to choose the symbol, and this determines how the label renders, including the font, point size, color of the font, etc. This process is much more efficient and user-friendly than previous processes for creating new annotation features. Displaying your annotation so it can be seen easily is very important. There are several new masking tools in the Cartography Tools toolbox that will help you with this. The Feature Outline Mask tool in particular creates a polygon feature class that stores a mask for each feature in the input feature class. You will use this functionality to display dark annotation on a dark image or to mask out part of a feature that displays in conjunction with an annotation feature. The real benefit of using this functionality is that it has the ability to mask out as many features as you want. So here we're masking out the rivers, but if there were other features in this area that we wanted to see come through, we could have those features come through. In the example in the graphic, we are masking out the river feature, so the annotation feature is seen more easily. This Cartography Tools toolbox is only available with an ArcInfo license. So that brings us to our third and final software demonstration. And in this demonstration, I'd like to show you all the converting labels to annotation with our label classes, and also how to create a new annotation feature. So let's go ahead and open that San Diego map document here. And we'll go ahead and turn the freeways on. We want to be able to see those because those are the labels that will convert to annotation. And I'll bring this labeling toolbar down, and let's go ahead and turn off the labels for zip codes and turn our freeways on. There we go. So if you recall back to the presentation, in order to work with the annotation, we have to start an editing session. So in a moment, I'll be pulling the editor toolbar onto the interface. But let's first create the annotation from those labels. And you do that by right-clicking the freeways, going to Convert Labels to Annotation. And here we are storing that annotation in the database for all of our features. We're going to call it Freeways Anno 2. It's going to be stored in our San Diego Personal Geodatabase. And we'll convert those unplaced labels to unplaced annotation, that new and nice option that we have. So I'll go ahead and click Convert, and it's going through and doing that for us. Incidentally, when it does add the new annotation layer to the map, it turns off the other labels that we had on and turns the annotation on. So that's kind of nice. So here you see this new annotation feature class that's been added to the map. We have two different annotation classes, far range and close range. And remember, we had scale dependencies set on those, so that's why our close range isn't showing right now. If I do a right click on the layer and open the attribute table, I want to go ahead and show you that status field. Here it is. These annotations have been placed, but we do have some annotation down here at the end that is unplaced. So that's that new field. So let's go ahead and start an editing session so I can add some annotation to the map. And we'll go ahead to the editor here. And that kind of went off the screen, but I'm starting an edit session there. And we're going to set our target to the far range annotation. So we're going to work in the current display area. I'll go ahead and move that back up and grab our annotation toolbar. Now this annotation toolbar is very long, so in order to have it display entirely within this ArcMap display, I had to compress it. So you do that very simply by dragging this over to the right. So let's go ahead and open the unplaced annotation window and see what annotation didn't get placed for our far range annotation features. And there were quite a few that didn't get placed, but let's focus in on this Rosecrans. When I click it, you'll notice that the place where it should be highlights. So it's very simple then to just right-click, choose the Place Annotation, it places it. Then I can use this Edit Annotation tool to move it to wherever I want. Okay, so very easy. The other thing I want to show you here is how to create a new piece of annotation. Remember, we had talked that in the lesson or the presentation, the slides, that you can enter some text in a text box, or you can actually hover over the feature and click Control W. Well, I'm going to go ahead and show you that option. You need to choose your construction type, so I'm going to go ahead and choose leader line. And if I come down here to my feature and press Control W, there's the text from the feature. If I click, there's the leader line. If I click again, it's created the annotation. Then again, I could use the edit annotation to move it to wherever I wanted to put it. So those are just a couple things that we can do from the new annotation toolbar. We're going to go back to the slides now. Go to our last Q&A session here, and I'll turn it over to Sally.
Thank you, Jamie. We have an interesting question from Dawn in Iowa City. Is transparency possible for labels or annotation? Actually, for labels, you could choose one of the gray colors, the percentage colors. But for annotation, you're now working with a feature class. And transparency is available via the feature class layer properties. So yes, you can apply a transparency to your annotation. Felix has asked an excellent question that we haven't covered up until now. And do I need to set a reference scale before using the label engine? Actually, you will want to set a reference scale for your labels, and this is the scale at which your labels appear at the size that you define them. Also keep in mind that you'll want to set a reference scale if you're going to be converting your labels to annotation. Nick in San Diego asks whether annotation can be stored in a personal geodatabase, and you've actually just watched a demonstration with annotation in a personal geodatabase. So everything that Jamie did was using personal geodatabase. Gary wonders, how do you determine whether to use annotation or labels? Well, for one thing, I kind of think of them as a continuum. Generally, I begin with labels and then convert the labels to annotation. Labeling gives me the ability to set up properties, the font, the size, the color, maybe even a label expression. I can set those up very quickly and easily. Labels, though, are dynamic, so they do move around depending on your zoom extent. However, once you convert to annotation, you now have your text in fixed locations, still available for editing. So the main difference might be whether you're willing to accept dynamic labeling or whether you want your annotation in a fixed location and do want the ability for editing individual pieces. Todd from Ypsilanti in Michigan asks about the annotation functionality, and is it the same for both the standard engine and the Maplex extension? This is also an excellent question. Basically, you define your labels, so it doesn't matter which engine you are using for creating your labels. Once you have labels, then you can convert those labels to annotation. So it's basically the same annotation functionality. Rachel from North Vancouver has a question on editing, and Jamie actually illustrated this during the last portion of the presentation. But can you select several annotation features and edit the attributes simultaneously? Absolutely. This is a form of bulk editing. So using the annotation tool, select the features that you want to edit, open the attributes, make sure you're highlighted at the class level, and then make your change. Perhaps it's to the font size or the font type. Winter Park about the Edit Annotation toolbar and whether it's available with the ArcView license. Yes, it is. ArcView users are able to edit standard geodatabase annotation. And now we're running a little short of time. Let me return once more to Jamie to complete the presentation.
Thank you, Sally. Okay, we want to provide you with some more information on this topic, labeling and annotation. Sally's been working on a course through the virtual campus called Creating and Editing Labels and Annotation. This is going to be coming out very soon, so I encourage you to look at that course and see if it meets your needs. She's done a really good job on that. There are a couple instructor-led training classes that you could take that would help you to learn more about labeling and annotation, one of which is Cartography with ArcGIS, and the other is What's New in ArcGIS 9. Product Documentation has some great books regarding this topic as well. There's a book called Using Maplex for ArcGIS and an HTML document on Maplex as well, found at esri.com. On behalf of ESRI, I'd like to thank you all for attending.